Let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thank you so much for this day. We pray that you will watch over us this day. Pray you'll give us hearts to understand, ears to hear, and to help us to make sense of the difficult times in which we live. Pray that you'll bless us in Jesus' name, amen. Well, this week I'm going to title this Inversion of Reality. Just let me give a little bit of an update on some things that I did this week. Last Monday, this is an interview of Danny Seaman. Used to be head of the government press office in Israel. We talked about the war in Gaza, the situation in the West Bank, and a little bit about what's going on up north. Danny was very, very straight with me. Danny works with the Israeli Defense and Security Forum, IDSF, that I highly recommend that you watch. So you can get that on our YouTube channel. I do a weekly update Q&A or just discussion with Tom Hughes on Tuesdays. I think it's going to be running live most Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Pacific. And I may have those times wrong. Maybe it's 2 p.m. Eastern. I think it's 2 p.m. Eastern now. Yeah, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And then on this Thursday, I'm going to get a couple of my friends together, and we're going to try to have a couple-hour discussion about technology and the end times and how we can navigate that. And that'll be Tom Hughes, Britt Gillette, who does End Times Bible Prophecy, and Scott Townsend. And Scott and Britt will scare you to death. I'm the calm guy in the room. No, I'm just kidding. They're both wonderful guys, and have a lot of respect for them. And so that'll be Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern live on the FBC YouTube channel. And we're also going to try to stream it onto Britt's channel and Tom Hughes' channel, hopeforOurTimes.com, and then End Time Bible Prophecy. That's Britt's channel. And then I don't know if Scott has a specific channel or not. So that's going to be a couple hours. We thought that it would do that. And then in a few weeks, I'm going to sit and have a similar discussion with longtime friends, Mike Spalding, pastor of Calvary Chapel in Lima, and Carl Techribe from Canada. And I probably shouldn't try to say whenever I say the name of something in another country, I don't say it right. So I don't know if Manitoba or Manitoba, near Saskatchewan. I don't know if it's Saskatchewan, So somebody will write and tell me how to say it. So not something that I talk about every day. So I think that's going to be on about March 6th or 8th. I should check, because now I think I have a conflict. Nope, I don't. So we talk each week about these different signs of the times that we're looking at, how everything is converging, how as we get closer, we'll have a better understanding. So I'm going to refer you to Revelation chapter 6 rather than take time to read it, which talks about the 7 sealed judgments that are coming. And it's interesting as I watch my email, and I do read most of it that I get from people. I apologize, I just do not have time to respond. Because I get a lot. And for example, this week, I know I got at least 3 different views on how the seals unfold, and some that they're already unfolding. So the question is, just pay attention. Eventually we're going to have enough knowledge to say this is that which was prophesied. I personally think the seals unfold over time. The seal opens, and then the effects of the seal begin and grow and reach a crescendo, a peak at some point. And as I always say, so time is along the bottom, intensity is along the back wall, but this is not to scale. And we have this, as these seals are broken, we're going to get a better understanding, and then the trumpets and the bowl judgments. And again, I talk to people all the time and I get all this. Everybody's got a different view as to Revelation being chronological, Revelation being chiastic, which I won't even try to explain to you right now, which is a very interesting view and it has some merit to it. But it completely upends the way you look at Revelation, the interrelationship between the seals and the bowls. So let's talk about some of the things going on in the world, culture, what people are doing to us, not what, there's very little of what people are doing for us as we get closer to this period of time. So this is an interesting story. This person went in and shot up Joel Osteen's church. Was killed in the altercation. And you've noticed I've tried not to use a pronoun for this person because I read a bunch of stories, I heard reports, and this is the thing is now when somebody does something, you can't tell whether it was a he or a she or an it. It's unbelievable. So I believe that this person was born male, claimed to be female. They found pro-Hamas slogan on her gun, long rifle. He was shot, did I just say she? On his rifle. He was shot and killed. Had a child with him who got shot in the head, and I don't think there's a lot of hope for them. But so what I did was, and some other people on the internet pulled it out, so they did some good research. This person came from El Salvador. But look at what's on the police card, intake card at the Houston Police Department. Do you think they're woke? Escalante Moreno, Jeffrey. Sex, female, white, non-Hispanic. What? Right. Where was she born? El Salvador. He was an immigrant. So somebody went to the website, the GOP website, where you can look up whether people voted in the last election, and this immigrant voted in the last election for president in 2020. Now, was he naturalized citizen? There's no indication. Believe me, if he was, people would be saying it. Sometimes you have to look at things from silence. By the way, on the transgender issue, which this person claimed to be, this is in the Daily Mail Friday. Top Canadian surgeon unwittingly reveals truth about sex change operations. Unearthed video lifts the lid on ill-trained doctors, dying appendages, and dreaded complications. Really? And so I will, if I remember when I get home, I'll put the link to the Daily Mail article. But if you just type in the first few words, top Canadian surgeon and Daily Mail, you'll get in Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine you use, it'll come up. And it links to videos, including, sometimes as I'm preparing these, I watch a lot of videos and I exercise mercy by not playing them to you. But it says here, the pink-haired Portland surgeon reveals the truth about sex change kids. So pink-haired guy, listen, I'm getting old. I don't get that. Okay. The bright green, pink, all that, it's just not, it's not in my wheelhouse. And if you ever see Pam Howler show up like that, you'll know that I'm dead. That would be a good sign that John's no longer with us, or I'm institutionalized or something. But it's about a 37-minute video, and you should go watch part of it. I would recommend that you do it to see these lunatics have graduated from medical school. And they work for major hospitals. But this doctor came out and he said, maybe we're going after the money too quickly on this because this stuff doesn't work. And this pink-haired doctor goes into detail about constructing female body parts for a male that wants to change and the problems that come about. And there's lots of complications. It doesn't solve the problem. It's a big, fat lie. So then we had this. The Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl. They had a parade in Kansas City, and there was a shooting. Now, the question is, have you heard them identify the race of the shooter? I have not. I've heard there are 2 teenagers in custody, that it was a personal dispute, it wasn't a terrorist act. And so on Bill Maher's program on Friday night, Ann Coulter and Van Jones, who used to be with CNN, were talking about the identity, the racial identity of the shooter, and here's how the discussion went.
I mean, we don't know who did this shooting, by the way, the Super Bowl shooting.
We have some idea.
What?
If it were a white man shooting, we'd know.
Well, we don't know. But
that's how we know it's not a white man. I can tell you that much.
Do you think they were repressing that reporting?
They wouldn't tell us about the transgender woman that shot up the Christian school for like a year. San Bernardino out here. Remember the crazy terrorist Muslims? That's when I first noticed. They're not telling us who it is. It's not a white male. The longer they go without telling you, it's not a white male.
Okay, well, for this one, for right now, as of Friday night, February 16th,
we know.
We don't officially know. Okay, you have special powers.
Well, and that special power is common sense and experience. And it's so funny because sometimes Bill Maher is very good at, once you get past the bad language and stuff, he's very anti-woke at times. But then there are times where he lives in L.A., just can't help himself. And of course, Van Jones. So then Ann Coulter and Van Jones had a little discussion about the problem. Here you go.
The media who do not care about blacks killing blacks. And this is the one time where you always hear, pretty white girl, they'll cover that. No, the blacks killing blacks will not get covered by the media. That's a huge media problem, and you'll all laugh at me, but I'm going to say it because I'm right.
Very right.
Because of this is illegitimacy. All of these young men do not have fathers, and that is a huge, huge source of it. Anything that could be done to reduce the illegitimacy rate, particularly among the black community, it would be astronomical, the changes you'd see. Do you know, just one fact, if you take away the factor of illegitimacy, the difference in the black and the white crime rate disappears. It's an amazing fact.
It would be an amazing fact if it were true, but look,
it is a big part of it.
Listen, I've got 2 very small children. I've got my eye on this problem a lot. I'm trying to raise, black kids here in Los Angeles. I'm not a part of the pro-crime lobby.
So listen, look, I'm glad he's raising his kids. That's great, okay? But listen, if you can't acknowledge the problem, you are part of the problem. Have some stones, man. There's another way of saying that, but have some stones, dude, and step up. So some people investigated these claims. This is a chart, firearm homicide death rates by race. You see the first column is white. So this is death rate per 100,000. And what do you see? First column, 2.77 in Missouri per 100,000. Next column, 59.42. That's 30 times higher rate in that community. That's a problem. And if you point that out, you're a racist. No, I don't want to see that happen. When I was a kid, I remember Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the senator from New York, a classic liberal, who came out and said the illegitimacy rate in the African American community is way too high. It's approaching 25%. That was back in the 60s. You know what it is now? It's like 78% of babies are born to single mothers. And I'm telling you, I have a master's degree in correctional administration criminology. I've studied it. I worked in prisons, and I don't care what the race was in prisons. One of the factors, you just talk to the people and you pretty much come to a conclusion very quickly. Most of the people here grew up without a father. It's so easy to prove. Look, this is the government's own statistics. This is from a thing, it's the monthly or mortality and mortality weekly report from the Center for Disease Control, CDC. Okay. And so they talk about firearm homicide rates by race and ethnicity, 2019 to 2022. And here's the blown up part of that chart. And they have race and ethnicity, and you can see the columns. And so you can see here that middle column or middle line goes from 20.5 per 100,000 in 2019 to 27.5 in 2022. Now that's male and female, so this isn't broken down by sex. I don't think we're allowed to do, but look at what it is for whites and Hispanics. There's a problem. If you can't talk about the problem, you'll never get the problem solved. So Van Jones just doesn't have, I'm sorry, Van, you're probably a nice guy, but he doesn't have the courage to speak up and say the truth. This was an interesting editorial cartoon. It's the Border Czar. And you know what? And the other problem I have with doing these updates is I work on them all week long. And sometimes I'll say, well, I'll get back to that. And I'll go back to it. And when I start to go back to it, I'm like, well, that didn't happen this week, right? That happened 2 weeks ago. No, it happened Tuesday. And everybody I talk to who does these, and so when did the special counsel report on the President Biden come out? Was it this week or was it the end of last week? I don't even see, nobody remembers because so much has happened. But by the way, she stepped up this week, bless her heart, and said, I'm ready to serve. That ought to scare you to death. And maybe that was the plan all along. Somebody said that nobody will invoke the 25th Amendment against Biden because she's vice president, which means she would become president. And maybe there'll be a big rallying cry, but I'm hearing a lot of chatter that they're going to go to get Michelle Obama to run. It's insane. There's a lot of things going on in the world of commercial real estate and property. This is just one article that China is now going through a big real estate bust. They're a very large economy. Their economy is approaching that of the United States and may pass the United States soon. But they're going through what the United States went through in 2008, and it's bad. It's very bad. But all the experts are looking at it and say, at best, they're halfway through it. There have been some major bankruptcies, companies going out of business. It's having an impact on the Chinese stock market. They've suspended trading in a bunch of stocks from time to time. And this article at Business Insider, you can go look it up, says, it's sort of similar to the US, but it's much worse. The commercial real estate issue is bad here in the United States. Property values are falling, but the banks have not yet priced that decline in commercial real estate values into their portfolios. And a lot of those loans are going to have to be refinanced this year if the property value is lower. I think I played a clip from 60 Minutes last week or week before that said they won't be able to refinance, or they'll just turn the property back to the bank. But that has an impact on the banks. That puts pressure on the banks and the bank's cash reserves and that type of thing. And so a lot of people are saying we could have a real estate crisis here in the United States. This is an article from the Financial Times the other day on climate change, because everything has to relate back to climate change. So the uninsurable world is what this is called. I don't remember if I mentioned things at this point on podcast or here. So if I've said it before, just act like you never heard it before from me speaking here. I was talking to somebody who insures a lot of churches, helps churches get insurance. He was telling me churches who paid $5,000 to $8,000 a year for their insurance with relatively low deductibles, like $5,000, are now being quoted $155,000 to $185,000 for a year of insurance, and their deductible's been increased to $75,000. Now, Financial Times says, well, that's because of climate change, because there's all these storms. And the interesting thing is, we know there's going to be weather issues in the end times. But now we have this explanation. It's not maybe God doing this to judge the world. It's man doing it to himself, and it's you bad people who don't do what we tell you to do. So, interesting graph in the increase in insurance rates that you're seeing across the market. Last year, it says this had a record number of billion-dollar insured losses from extreme weather. 37 events. Look at 2000, it was only 4 or 5. Even in 2005, remember Katrina and a lot of the hurricanes that hit Florida back in those days, 2004, 2005. They didn't have that many, it was less than a third what we have now. There's also this fight going on in the, and I just say this for purposes of fitting it into what are these people doing? They're blinded by this change in climate. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but the U.S. has been producing a lot of gas, and we've been producing a lot of gas and shipping it to the world through liquefied natural gas, but now the Biden administration is coming in and stopping the building of new natural gas liquefaction systems. Well, that's going to put pressure on Europe, which doesn't get much gas from Russia any longer. They could. Putin says that Nord Stream, at least one pipeline in Nord Stream, is still operational. I've heard rumors that they're also fixing the other 3, but that thing never happened. Before it got destroyed, Germany had said, no, we're not going to do this. We're not going to let Nord Stream 2 come online. They were partners in it, and they had to say so. Nord Stream 2 never shipped a centimeter of gas, but they could have. But before it was destroyed, long before it was destroyed, and we can argue about who did it. And I think it was some people from the West that did it. Let's just put it that way. Although I could make the case from a legal standpoint that elements within the Russian business community could have done it to themselves. I know people say, oh, you're absolutely out of your mind. No, I'm not. I know how the documents read. I'm just saying is you can make the case for that, but all evidence does seem to indicate that it was the West. But so we're producing a lot of gas right now in the United States. Something's going on though. Gas has gone up like $1 over $1 a gallon for regular. I've got it for $2.03 a gallon a few weeks ago, and I saw this morning it's like $3.40 a gallon on the way to church for regular. But Shell is even predicting a rise in LNG demand of 50% by 2040. This is going to make the climate change people just their head explode. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about AI. There was this meeting this week. Now, in 2023, this meeting in Dubai was called the World Government Summit. Apparently, they got a lot of grief over the title World Government. One world, we can't talk about a one world government, and I'm sure that's going to get tagged with some kind of warning on this video. And by the way, every video we put up now, they create a transcript of. So if you have trouble following on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube, click on the CC button, and usually sometime Sunday or late Sunday or Monday, there will be closed captions. It's all done by voice recognition, artificial intelligence, that type of thing. The problem is, and I see this from a lot of friends, they're actually going back to old videos that have been okay and on your channel for years and saying, oh, you weren't allowed to say that. We're going to demonetize you for that video. And a lot of times, well, they don't tell you what they did, why they did it. Now, we don't monetize our channel. Sometimes there will be ads that appear, but that's because I use a video. And so to not get a copy, to sort of settle whether it's fair use or not, it's always fair use. They allow ads to be attached to our videos, and all the revenue that might be generated goes to the holder of the alleged copyright. So I've said the worst person in the world is Oprah. So I haven't played many of her clips for a long, I don't even know if she's doing anything anymore, except using her money unwisely to cause a lot of trouble. But so in 2003, the World Government Summit met. This year, they changed the name. In fact, I went back to archive.org. If you go to archive.org, if you grab the URL, the address, copy it from the address bar in your browser, go to archive.org and paste it in, it will show you every time that they saved that URL an image of the page. And so I went back to 2003 to February, and it was called the World Government Summit. Now today, it's called the World Governments Summit. Well, that'll fool them, right? Boy, I'm glad they did that. Yeah, World Government Summit. Yeah, I'm sure that they did not. So I've got a couple clips, and I'm only going to play them because we just had Davos. I don't think I played any clips of him. I'm going to play a clip of Klaus Schwab, who gave the keynote address at the World Government Summit. And understand, these guys, it's like a roving band of billionaire gypsies as they roam around the earth doing these conferences, saying the same thing. So here's Klaus, and you'll see at the beginning of this who's sitting in the front row at the World Government Summit. He had just finished his interview with Vladimir Putin, and here we go.
Now, we are speaking not just about the fourth industrial revolution. We are speaking about the transition of humankind into a new era, which is not just characterized by technological change. A new era where humankind will enjoy many more opportunities and possibilities. It's a transition. It's a transition from we first had the transition about 100 years ago from the agricultural society to the industrial society. But today, we speak about the transition into what I would call the intelligent age. And I did something maybe unusual. I took ChatGPT And I had a long discussion with ChatGPT, with my hot, if I may say so, to see how this new era will look like. I had about 20 pages of text, and I asked ChatGPT,
Doesn't read them all, just relax.
summarize the text and tell me now, based on our discussion, how will the new era, the intelligent era, look like? And I read you the text. Envisioning a future propelled by the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution, we see a new dawn of human civilization, one that harmonizes technology with the deepest needs and aspirations of humanity. This vision unfolds within a society where artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of the Things, 3D printing, genetic engineering, quantum computing become the foundations of our daily life, yet are guided by a profound respect for human values, creativity, and the natural world.
Now, first of all, imagine if you had gone to speech class in college, which I had speech class in college 50 years ago this semester. And if I had gone and said, well, ChatGPT gave me the speech, Professor Fink, that was her name. It's probably my favorite class in college. Because I got to get up and speak, which I seem to like to do. But if I had said that, she would say, well, I don't care what ChatGPT told you. You're getting an F. I expect you to think on your own. So here's Klaus Schwab, this really rich guy, in a room full of billionaires, and nobody says, hey, you fraud, do your own speech. You don't need artificial intelligence unless you don't have an idea. But the other interesting thing is if you listen to him, you can tell when he's talking about agricultural age and that type of thing, he's been listening to Yuval Harari a lot that he's had speak at Davos and otherwise. Here, I'm going to skip a couple of the clips. I'm going to play this one where he kind of says something that he said many years ago.
When I explained some years ago the fourth industrial revolution, I think of three particular aspects. It's first the speed. We are now in the exponential phase. And just as an example, the internet is now about 30 years old. The social media about 20, 25 years old. We will see, and how much have they changed our lives? We will see the same amount of change, the same speed of change in the next 10 years. So it's a compression, time compression of change. That's the first one. The second one is, when we talked about the first industrial revolution, we had, of course, the steam engine, we had electricity, but now we have a multitude of technologies, all working together to a certain extent in combination. Just think of the power of the combination of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and big data. So it's a combination of the different technologies which really bring the fundamental change. And finally, I think we have to be prepared for a world where we see a fusion of our physical, our digital, and our biological dimensions. So it will be a world integrating the physical, biological, and the digital dimensions.
So they're coming out, and you need to understand, the issue of deep fakes and everything, it's already off the charts. Sometimes it's easy to tell, sometimes it's not so much, but there's a OpenAI and has this thing called Sora, and you can type in text and you can get a video. So for example, this is an example. They typed in historical footage of California during the gold rush, and this is the video they got back. So here's a little video. I don't think there's any sound on this. So they like a litter of golden retriever puppies playing in the snow. This looks like the dog next door. Borneo wildlife on Madagascar. It's all generated by AI. Drone view of Big Sur. I'll give a shout out to my friend Scott, so you can use this for your vacation pictures now. Photorealistic close-up of a naval battle of old ships on a cup of coffee. Here's the California Gold Rush again. I think there's one more. Oh, there's a couple more on here. It's actually pretty good. It's not dirty enough, but it's, you know, looks like they've been out just sweeping the dirt lately. Somehow I saw a picture of Deadwood. We were in Deadwood, South Dakota last year, and saw a picture of it 100 years ago. Beautiful silhouette animation of wolves howling at the moon. So I guess I should generate one with wolves in sheep's clothing misleading their congregation. So it's in a silhouette. Now, these videos can be very deceptive. So somebody posted this and said, oh, look at this video. Look at this like demon angel flying up into the sky. It does kind of look like that, right? Now, but very simple. So you got to be careful. So here's how you figure out. Flip it on its side, and this is what it looks like. It's a duck with a shadow in the pond. See? Oh, so it's not something that'll be. Now, this is interesting. I played a clip. This was the news conference where Vladimir Putin, back in November, I think it was, had a big press conference. Can you imagine our president sitting in a room for a couple hours with the press like this, like he does? So I admire him for that. So he's sitting there, and the host says, okay, we got a questioner for you, Mr. President. Now, I want you to watch Putin's reaction when he looks up and sees the screen, okay? Because that's what he's going to see when he looks at the screen.
Until you reply, we have another video on the same topic, quite impressive. Let's have a look at this video. Mr. President, good afternoon. I'm a student and I study at the St. Peter Institute. Do you have a lot of twins? And another point, what is your attitude towards the dangers fraught with the neural networks and the artificial intelligence? So he did not introduce himself, this person from St. Petersburg. Oh well, I see. You can talk like me and use my voice, my pitch, but I figured that only one person could speak like myself and use my voice, and this is going to be me. It was a joke by one of our political figures as regards the AI. This is my first twin. This is my twin number one.
So he goes on and talks about AI, and he had said, this is back in 2017, you can find it. Elon Musk tweeted about it, and it says, back in September 4th, 2017, it begins, Putin says that the nation that leads AI will be the ruler of the world. And he went on, I had another clip, I think I forgot to throw it in here, where he goes and he says, listen, you know, we're trying to be the leader in AI in the world. So does he have big ambitions? You know, always getting these arguments with friends. Oh, he's just, you know, he's not. He's the biggest crime boss on the planet. It seems like one of his political rivals, there was a video of him Thursday night, 43 years old, dead. And he's been poisoned before. So a video of him on Thursday, he was just fine, joking, laughing, and now he's dead. And this happens with some regularity among rivals to this guy. He also said in an interview this week, he said he didn't think Tucker did a very good, he wasn't that hard hitting like he expected, but that he would prefer Biden to be reelected because he's predictable. In other words, I can control him. Now, AI, this is kind of an interesting thing. Sam Altman of OpenAI is running around raising $7 trillion to build infrastructure. Power hungry, this is Financial Times. Tuesday, power hungry data centers add to strains on grids. And go out, as I say, go out to New Albany, drive down Beach Road, south from 161, and look at all the server farms down there, and then understand they take a lot of power to run them. The Google server farm appears from the air to be 1/3 to 50% cooling towers. Microsoft is training AI to dig through the nuclear regulations on building nuclear power plants to short circuit the approval process so they can put small nuclear power plants with their server farms. So they have power. Now, by the way, I'm not against nuclear power. I think it would be great if we had more of it. But as this article says, many grids cannot handle these AI-driven workloads. It's easier said than done being green. And then you have the problem of cryptocurrency, which also consumes a tremendous amount of power. And AI is doing a lot of things. Killer robots, AI, robotics companies. Here's just a short clip from a movie that came out a few years ago called Slaughterbots to show the problem of these drone swarms.
We're live with Brett Howe on the line from where police are now confirming a drive-by shooting at a polling station.
They're all in a line, shot in the head just where they stood. The whole line is dead.
The line is dead?
Looks like some voters had children with them. All spared, not even hurt.
Brett, local PD are saying a suspicious device may have been discovered. Could this be Slaughterbots?
No parts on the ground. I can see. I haven't heard any.
So when you see these New Year's Eve shows like in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, where they have all these drone swarms making flags and silhouettes or images of people in the sky, understand that that all has a military application. It's all done by computers. You couldn't orchestrate 300 people to get the drones to fly like that, or maybe 2,000 drones. But then you can get these drone swarms, and so now this is a problem. And so this is a movie about what these drones can do, or robotics.
Yet another national security crisis for this administration.
Everybody was dancing, and then suddenly we heard.
So that's a movie. You can get that on the eye. New AI deepfakes complicate 2024 votes. It is. It's going to be a problem. Big tech vows to fight bogus electoral AI content. Trump has expressed concern about this. So the Lincoln Project, which hates Trump with a passion, came out with this video, and you'll see at the beginning it says, "Hey, Donald Trump, you say you've accused us of doing fake AI? Okay. Or AI generated videos about you? Look at this one, Trump." Okay.
Donnie, I always knew you'd blow it. You were always a fool, a joke, low rent. I bailed you out so many times. Your deals were all garbage. You couldn't even make money off a casino. I'm ashamed you have my name.
That's an AI-generated video of Donald Trump's father castigating him. And again, we have these cases against Trump. His hush money case is going to go to trial. I think this is probably the weakest one. We have the thing that appears to be falling apart down in Georgia. I don't know whether it will. And we know it's okay to keep top secret documents in your garage, but supposedly not at your estate where they're under surveillance of the Secret Service. It's an insane world. This is, I think I heard this on Glenn Beck. So here's a mention that AI is being used to go back and review people's emails, Twitter posts, YouTube videos, what you said to suppress their reach. So Glenn Beck said this week they did a documentary and it's been demonetized. And he goes, we spent money to put that together, but you don't like what we said, so now you're going to demonetize. And so Google will get to keep all the ad revenue money for themselves, like they need it. Or these little companies and NGOs that have propped up, like this is a single person guy, single person entity called Center for Countering Digital Hate. Counterhate.org is the website. And he's come up like, we've got to challenge them on the new climate denial. Well, what's the new climate denial? If you say, well, I think global warming is actually not bad for humanity. I think, Gary, I said to you, if I'm fighting for tea times in February in Ohio, I'm fine with global warming. Bring it on. I liked last week when it was in the 60s better than this week. But so he says we used AI. So he uses, this single guy uses AI, and he's the guy who went after Glenn Beck. So Glenn has a big staff, pays him well. Look at what happened. We use AI to analyze denialist claims in thousands of hours of YouTube content. And now it's not so much that you say, well, I don't think this has been proven. It's if you're now saying, well, it may not be a problem in a lot of places. And again, when we live in this end times thing where a lot of these weather events are to become more predominant, it's crazy. So I'm going to play a few minutes of this. This is an interview that Tucker Carlson did. And Tucker was asked at the World Government Summit about the Middle East, and I thought he gave an incredibly poor answer. But it's his opinion. He's entitled to it. But the guy was trying to ask him about Israel and Gaza, and he just punted on it. But he did interview a guy named Mike Benz, who used to work for the State Department and has noticed a trend. And I just think it's one of the best interviews Tucker's ever done, if not the best. You should go look it up, watch it, take notes, figure out, because this shows what they're doing. Here's just a little bit of it.
Censorship of mail-in ballots is really one of the most extraordinary stories in all American history, I would argue. What happened is you had this plot within the Department of Homeland Security. Now, this gets back to what we were talking about with the State Department's Global Engagement Center. You had this group within the Atlantic Council and the Foreign Policy Establishment, which began arguing in 2017 for the need for a permanent domestic censorship government office to serve as a quarterback for what they called a whole of society counter-misinformation, counter-disinformation alliance. That just means censorship, the counter-mis-disinfo. But their whole society model explicitly proposed that we need every single asset within society to be mobilized in a whole of society effort to stop misinformation online. It was that much of an existential threat to democracy. And so, but they fixated in 2017 that it had to be centered within the government because only the government would have the clout and the coercive threat powers and the perceived authority to be able to tell the social media companies what to do, to be able to summon a government-funded NGO swarm to create that media surround sound, to be able to arm an astroturfed army of fact-checkers, and to be able to liaise and connect all these different censorship industry actors into a cohesive, unified whole. And the Atlantic Council initially proposed with this blueprint called forward defense. It's not offense, it's forward defense, guys. They initially proposed that running this out of the State Department's Global Engagement Center because they had so many assets there who were so effective at censorship under Rick Stengelsteed and under the Obama administration. But they said, we're not going to be able to get away with that because we don't really have a national security predicate, and it's supposed to be foreign-facing. We can't really use that hook unless we have a sort of national security one. Then they contemplated parking it at the CIA. And they said, well, actually, there's two reasons we can't do that. The CIA is foreign-facing. We can't really establish a counterintelligence threat to bring it home domestically. Also, we're going to need essentially tens of thousands of people involved in this operation, spanning this whole society model. You can't really run a clandestine operation that way. So they said, okay, well, what about the FBI? They said, well, the FBI would be great. It's domestic. But the problem is the FBI is supposed to be the intelligence arm of the Justice Department. And what we're dealing with here are not acts of law breaking. It's basically support for Trump, or if left-wing populists had risen to power like Bernie Sanders or Jeremy Corbyn, I have no doubt they would have done in the UK. They would have done the same thing to him there. They targeted Jeremy Corbyn and other left-wing populist NATO skeptical groups in Europe. But in the U.S., it was all Trump. And so essentially what they said is, well, the only other domestic intelligence equity we have in the U.S. besides the FBI is the DHS. So we are going to essentially take the CIA's power to rig and bribe foreign media organizations, which is a power they've had since the day they were born in 1947, and we're going to combine that with the power, with the domestic jurisdiction of the FBI by putting it at DHS. So DHS was basically deputized, it was empowered through this obscure little cybersecurity agency to have the combined powers that the CIA has abroad with the jurisdiction of the FBI at home. And the way they did this, how did an obscure little cybersecurity agency get this power, was they did a funny little series of switcheroos. So this little thing called CISA, they didn't call it the Disinformation Governance Board, they didn't call it the Censorship Agency, they gave it an obscure little name that no one would notice called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, whose founder said, we care about security so much it's in our name twice. Everybody sort of closed their eyes and pretended, that's what it was. But it was created by act of Congress in 2018 because of the perceived threat that Russia had hacked the 2016 election, had physically hacked it, and so we needed the cybersecurity power to be able to deal with that. And essentially on the heels of a CIA memo on January 6, 2017, and a same-day DHS executive order on January 6, 2017, arguing that Russia had interfered in the 2016 election, and a DHS mandate saying that elections are now critical infrastructure, you had this new power within DHS to say that cybersecurity attacks on elections are now our purview. And then they did two cute things. One, they said mis, dis, and malinformation online are a form of cybersecurity attack. They are a cyber attack because they are happening online. And they said, well, actually, Russian disinformation is, we're actually protecting democracy in elections. We don't need a Russian predicate after Russiagate died. So just like that, you had this cybersecurity agency be able to legally make the argument that your tweets about mail-in ballots, if you undermine public faith and confidence in them as a legitimate form of voting, you are now conducting a cyber attack on U.S. critical infrastructure by articulating misinformation on Twitter. And just like that, now what they did then is they...
So in other words, complaining about election fraud is the same as taking down our power grid.
Yes, you could literally be on your toilet seat at 9:30 on a Thursday night and tweet, I think that mail-in ballots are illegitimate. And you were essentially then caught up in the crosshairs of the Department of Homeland Security classifying you as conducting a cyber attack on U.S. critical infrastructure because you were doing misinformation online in the cyber realm, and misinformation is a cyber attack on democracy when it undermines public faith and confidence in our democratic elections and our democratic institutions. They would end up going far beyond that. They would actually define democratic institutions as being another thing that was a cyber security attack to undermine. And lo and behold, the mainstream media is considered a democratic institution. That would come later.
So you want me to go on? Well, go online and watch it because I have a bunch of other stuff I want to talk about. So they're watching this stuff. And so what you see, so you can transfer this over to Israel. So look, I have dear friends who disagree with me. They think I'm a lunatic on this. But the democratically elected Knesset in Israel exercised their authority to enact some judicial reform. They had a meltdown about that. But do you see that the narrative here, the democratically elected thing is against democracy because it was against their institution that they lionized the Supreme Court that really is not accountable to anybody except other lawyers that are in the chain to come on the Supreme Court. So it's an attack not on the democracy, it's an attack on our institutions where we work. So, listen, we can argue about whether the judicial reform in Israel was important or wrong or anything or was advanced by the wrong people. Everybody was talking about we need a judicial reform. Then somebody did it, and there was a meltdown in Israeli society over it because it attacked their institution, which they now call a democratic institution. But it's an institution that exists within a democracy. There's nothing democratic about the Israeli Supreme Court because the fix is, an old Facebook post of mine popped up this week where I had posted about the cases against Prime Minister Netanyahu. And some of them are they're totally bogus. Listen, I'm a lawyer. I know the law. They're ridiculous. And when I was at the Knesset a little over a year ago, I asked people, when are these cases against Netanyahu going to be over? And I had made this post back in 2017, 6 years ago. And in 2022, they said, well, they'll last another 5 or 6 years. Well, why are they doing that? Because that's the way they can control Netanyahu. And a lot of people think he needs control. That's fine. Vote him out of office. But and get a constitution that puts some other protections in if you think that's important. They have a lot of people doing this. Here's a CNBC interview with a guy from Meta, Facebook. Listen to what he says about how many people they have working in this area.
It does strike me that this is an issue, disinformation, misinformation, interference with the election that the government should be taking on. How many people do you have working on this issue, and how do you know what's enough?
So we have around 40,000 people working on kind of safety and integrity on our platforms. Generally, we spend a lot of money on it. We've spent about $20 billion in recent years on things like election integrity, about $5 billion in the last year alone. But here's the interesting point. Even if we employ double the number of content moderators that we have, actually, here's the irony. We're talking here about the risks of AI-generated content, but AI is also actually our most powerful tool to identify and deal with the kind of content we don't want to see on our platforms. So take hate speech, for instance, the prevalence of hate speech. In other words, the percentage of hate speech as a percentage of the total of content on Facebook is now down to about 0.01%. And that's been reduced by over 50% just in the last couple of years alone for one reason only: improvements in AI technology. So I think it's important for your viewers to know that, yes, of course, there are issues and concerns about how this technology is going to be used for bad purposes. It's ironically also the same technology that helps established players from making sure that their policies are being properly respected and enforced.
Okay. So here's Munich Security Conference. I don't really have any clips from that this week. But Europe they're saying, Europe can't rely on America anymore. Ursula von der Leyen says that the EU needs to fortify itself for a rougher world. There's a big narrative that Russia's going to invade everybody there. I don't know that it's true. Pakistan is having major problems. I get the party that won isn't allowed to assume power. And that's a nuclear power. And they're not getting along with India. And India took over an old Muslim mosque site and built this big Hindu temple on it that they just opened in the last couple of weeks. And remember, India was probably the biggest, in terms of numbers, slaughter in human history in this conflict between Muslims and Hindus. And I know for a fact missionaries, they came after Pastor Steve, if you remember, when he was over in India, and they're now doing that to Christian missionaries in India. So if you know them, you need to pray for them, for their safety. it's not good, and they're both nuclear powers, and it's crazy. Russia, Russia's taking over a city in the Donetsk region, and you can see they've just pretty much destroyed the thing. So the city's right here in that little crook in the middle, and I won't try to pronounce the name. And then this was a big article in the Financial Times. Alarm mounts over Moscow's hostile stance towards the West. We are living in truly dangerous times and at a point when large-scale conflict is more likely than it has been in recent history, said a military intelligence official. Russia's bellicose intent is still there, said a second UK defense official. Its land forces have been degraded in the Ukraine, but its air force and navy are largely intact, and Russia is still a major nuclear power. I mean, all this is true. The warning hangs over the Munich Security Conference, which started yesterday. The annual gathering of security, military, and intelligence officials and experts provides a snapshot of the global defense picture at a record time of instability. And they talk about Russia's rebuilding its defense industry, and there's also an article, I've read a bunch of articles this week, that the European Union, EU, NATO countries just can't keep up with the production that's going on in Russia. So it's a big concern. And they keep saying this, that Russia's intent and capability to attack a NATO country before the end of the decade was pretty much consistent within the U.S.-led military alliance. Russia also launched this kind of led to a lot of, everybody was going crazy. One of the congressmen, I think it was Mike Turner was his name, said Russia's doing a killer satellite or nuclear weapons in space. This is a video of the launch. And then as people unpacked it, maybe it is just a satellite launch. We don't know yet. We just don't know. So this was the big deal article of the week. And again, I'll try to remember when I get home to post the link to this article in the notes so you can go to it, although it may be behind a paywall. The Washington Post, U.S. Arab nations plan for post-war Gaza for a timeline for Palestinian state. There's talk that we're going to produce they're going to make Israel, or they're going to declare the existence of a Palestinian state with leadership sometime this summer. Also, in the same issue of the Washington Post, they had this article, How Trump Advanced Arab-Israeli Peace But Fueled Palestinian Rage, by having Israel and Arab countries enter into the Abraham Accords. And how did he do that? Why did it fuel Palestinian rage? Because he just said, we ignored them. We've tried with these guys for years. They don't want to do anything. But I played a little bit of this clip last week with this spokesperson for one of the Hamas Al-Qassam brigades. And in his talk on television, he said this. We look back 100 days. This is why he's saying, this is why one of the reasons we did this on October 7th. Now, a lot of people say it was the Abraham Accords, but he drills down into some more facts, which I think are relevant from a Bible prophecy standpoint. So you look back 100 days to remember the educated, the complicit, and the incapacitated among the world's powers governed by the law of the jungle, reminding them of aggression that reached its peak against our path, Al-Quds, Jerusalem, and Al-Aqsa, which they consider that whole Temple Mount compound, with the start of its actual temporal and spatial division and the bringing of red cows as a application of a destable religious myth designed for aggression against the feelings of an entire nation in the heart of its Arab identity and the path of its prophet, the night journey and ascension to heaven. All of that is a lie. That is not what the Quran says. It didn't happen in Jerusalem. A lot of people have said this, Arab publications, Saudi publications, but the narrative is that's why they have to do this, to get the conflict on the Temple Mount with the Jews. And by the way, that's a picture of a red heifer. You can read about that in the book of Numbers. There is talk that the red heifer may be sacrificed around Passover this year. Doesn't have to be a temple. It would be used to purify the temple and the area of the temple. They bought land on the Mount of Olives because the area where the sacrifice takes place has to overlook where the Holy of Holies will be. So they have the Mount of Olives. They have the plot of land, and they have a number of red heifers, apparently, that are ready to go. They're old enough. They came, I think, in large part from around Rockwall, Texas, where I spoke at a conference this past year. And by the way, that article appeared in the New Yorker magazine about the red heifers. Forcing the End was the title of the article. It was published in December 1988. So it's been around a while. So they talk about, this is one of the reasons, was the red heifer is why we're going after them. So back to this article, the Biden administration and a small group, this is from the Washington Post, of Middle East partners are rushing to complete a detailed, comprehensive plan for long-term peace between Israel and Palestinians, including a firm timeline for the establishment of a Palestinian state that could be announced as early as the next several weeks. The urgency of the effort is tied directly to a proposed pause in the fighting and release of the hostages held in Gaza by Hamas that is being negotiated by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt. An initial ceasefire, projected to be at least 6 weeks, would provide time to make the plan public, recruit additional support, and take the initial steps towards its implementation, including the formation of an interim Palestinian government, according to U.S. and Arab officials. And the Saudi foreign minister was at the Munich Security Conference today in Munich, Germany, saying, yeah, we want to do this. We think this is a Palestinian state is the way to go. Now, whether that survives when King Salman passes on, I don't know. Planners hope a hostage agreement can be reached before the beginning of Ramadan, the month of Muslim fasting that begins March 10, lest it compound the deprivation and pressure cooker atmosphere in Gaza. We don't want to interfere with the Muslim holy days. Like, does anybody ever say, well, Hamas came on Simchat Torah, in Israel, a Jewish high holy day, and did a massacre in the south of Israel? Nobody ever says that. It's unbelievable. The key is the hostage deal, said one U.S. official among several Arab and American diplomats who discussed the subject on the condition of anonymity to avoid derailing the plan before it is completed. But even as planning participants, including Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the United States, the United Arab Emirates, and Palestinian representatives, in addition to the United States. Now, in this peace deal, who's missing in that list of countries? Israel. They said, well, it's like Israel's kind of an important component to that. And so I've said this for a while. This Daniel 9 thing could be something that's shoved down Israel's throat. Now, the Palestinians won't agree to this. Maybe it'll be shoved down their throat too. Can't discount that possibility. The elephant in the planning room is Israel. Oh, I guess we got to Israel. They're the elephant now that's causing all kinds of problems for everybody. And whether its government will acquiesce to much of what is being discussed, the withdrawal of many, if not all, settler communities on the West Bank, a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem, and a security and governance arrangement for a combined West Bank and Gaza. The hope is that Israel will be offered specific security guarantees and normalization with Saudi Arabia and other Arab states that would be hard to refuse. So that's what they're looking at. Interesting. This actually was on the Washington Post website. We three agree that dictator Trump can't gain power. Oh, by the way, did you see this informant got charged with a crime, lying about the Bidens? Did you see that? He was the one who came and gave information to Congress about that they might be involved in some bribe deals. He's been a paid, listen, I know how this works. He's been a paid asset, confidential informant of the United States FBI for over a decade. Now, all of a sudden, as we get close to an election, the guy who might be able to tie, and Biden is, there's an impeachment inquiry going on in the House. Oh, the guy, he's now charged with a crime and he can't be credible at all. But the FBI's relied on him for over a decade. This is, we don't live. In the USA that you knew when you were a kid is gone. And so, listen, everybody, well, Trump's a bad guy. Okay, so let's assume Trump's a bad guy. But they're coming after him with nonsense, which means they'll go after, when they're done with him, they'll go after you for nonsense too. And if you don't think the DOJ does that, you've never been caught up in representing people who are caught up in a DOJ investigation. I'm just telling you, I know from personal experience, it's not. And so Biden is pressing Netanyahu to accept this deal. Michael Duran wrote about this at the Hudson Institute. President Biden will recognize a Palestinian state in early summer. Duran's a pro-Israel guy. We support the establishment of an independent Palestinian state, and we do a lot of work inside the government to think about how to bring that about, said State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller on January 31st. So this is Ayatollah Khamenei, and this is a great post by Ava Kulerit, whatever her name is. You can see how she spells it there. I'm not even going to try the phonetic of that, but she has a great post on Twitter analyzing how Iran is responding to all this, how they're behind this, and she concludes with this: ending Hamas and then pushing Hezbollah behind Litani River up in the north in Lebanon, along with launching a strike on its military factories and missile capabilities, will cause Iran to lose its most important card in the region and will push the Sunni countries led by Saudi Arabia to normalization. In other words, what she says is, and she's a pretty good analyst of Middle East geopolitics, she says, if Israel, she says, it looks like Iran's weaker than it was before October 7th. If Israel fights and if they go after Hezbollah, they will really weaken Iran. And this happened in Iran. These are pictures of a couple gas pipelines that had explosions this week in Iran. They're major gas pipelines. And Iran has come out and said this was done by Israel. Here's a map of where that occurred. And this is a big deal. Hezbollah has lost a lot of people. You can go to the website of Al-Manar, a TV website in Lebanon, very pro-Hamas, and they have all the people that have been killed. It's like 250, 300. It's almost as many soldiers that have been killed in the IDF in Gaza. It's pretty close. Here's our friend Amos Hochstein, who's running around trying to make peace, speaking with a journalist at the Munich Security Conference about, well, what are we going to do with Lebanon? We're trying to make peace in Lebanon. I made the peace with the maritime border on the gas fields out there, which Lapid signed when he really was a lame duck prime minister. That's another point. But here's a little bit of what he said in Munich yesterday.
I want to kick off by asking you about something that, of course, is dear to both our hearts, and that is the situation today in Lebanon. What is the U.S. government doing to prevent war there?
Well, what we've been trying to do, Hadley, is to make sure that we can contain the fighting to the lowest level possible and to work on solutions that are lasting solutions that can bring a cessation of the hostilities. Obviously, there's a tie-in to what's happening in Gaza. I've been to Lebanon on a couple of occasions recently and to Israel just a few days ago. President Biden has been clear that what we want to see is a cessation of hostilities, an ability for people of Lebanon to return to their homes in the south. There are over 100,000 people who are displaced, and Israelis to be able to return to their homes in the north of Israel on the border. But they have to be able to return not just because there's a ceasefire, but because there are conditions in place that guarantee the security. And I think that the conditions have changed after October 7th. The requirements of what counts for security is not the same as it was on October 6th. And therefore, we have to have a more comprehensive...
Okay, I don't particularly care for him. So Israel's now attacking Lebanon, Washington Post. They're hitting major sites in southern Lebanon. Here's front page of the Al Akbar newspaper yesterday. And they're talking about we're going to withdraw to within 10 kilometers. The proposal from Hochstein is they'll withdraw to within 10 miles of the border. That's 10 kilometers. That's 6 miles. And Nasrallah gave a speech. And in his speech, what he said was, listen, what we're going to do is we're going to take revenge on Israel. They killed some of our people the other day, a mother and a couple kids in a strike in Lebanon. We're going to take blood revenge on that. And then they also said, listen, we're going to, if you think it's bad in Israel right now, so in Lebanon, they've had about 100,000 people had to evacuate the southern part of Lebanon. In Israel, they've had about 100,000 people evacuate the northern part of Israel. And Nasrallah says, listen, you push us, we'll make it 2 million people in the north will have to evacuate. You're talking like all the way down to Haifa or more. And we're going to do it. And so that's what he says. Good article at Foreign Affairs, even though I'm not a big fan of them. Russia's dangerous new friends. Russia's long been a supporter of the PLO. In fact, they're the ones who came up with the Palestinian term back in the 60s. And you can take, what do they say? You can take the guy out of the KGB, but you can't get the KGB out of the guy, and Putin was a KGB agent. So here's another article about, from the Hudson Institute. The second point that they have is that the Houthis are going to continue to be a problem. Unmanned surface vehicle deterrent is exacerbating the conflict in the Red Sea. We're not ratcheting them down, even with the attacks. And so what you have is you have this low-level warfare that's more than an annoyance. A lot of ships are avoiding the Red Sea. They're tracking and tagging every ship that's bound for Israel in any fashion from going into the Red Sea, which means if they're coming from China, they have to go all the way around Africa, all the way through the Mediterranean. Now, part of what the G20 did at their meeting in India in September was they came up with this trade corridor that would go across ships from the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and Bahrain would transfer their cargo to trucks. They would take them across Jordan to Israel to ports, where they'd be put back on ships and then shipped across, and they would save that big transit time. But the concern is, and this is the corridor of betrayal is what Tehran is calling this. And the question I had for somebody, we were talking about it this weekend, it's like, if they're attacking ships, why aren't they going to attack? Do you think they might not use the drones to attack trucks that are driving through the desert? Now, they're going a little bit faster, but the drones can probably handle them with artificial intelligence and programming. So it's going to be a problem. And Yemen is very poor. They're getting money from Iran. And they're a major headache in world shipping right now. It's about, I think, 15. And you have the problem of the Straits of Hormuz that Iran can shut down. Here's from Financial Times, ships are shutting down. This is a tweet, an article about Iran has a ship, a container ship, that has these containers that hide missile launchers. This has been talked about by the guys at Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney and others, for a long time. I think they're called Project K or K Club containers, and they will do that. And so, I mean, you can see this is how they're launching them from these containers. And how many of these have made it through into our country and have been distributed? We don't know. I mean, we don't know who's coming across the border. Hezbollah missiles ready to hit as far as Eilat. Again, some headlines from the Tehran Times. Endless Hamas. No foreign dictates on Palestinians. And in the interview with, now this third point in this article at the Hudson Institute is that Biden's doing this because he's afraid of losing Michigan in the election. Well, the people who are making decisions are afraid of losing Michigan in the election. I don't know that it's Biden at this point. I just think it's cruel to put him out there all the time like that. By the way, King Abdullah II of Jordan was here with Biden. They did a big news conference the other day, and they talked, we need to assure the safety of the Muslim holy sites. They're not. There's a mosque there. I'll grant you that. But none of the stuff that you say happened on the Temple Mount happened on the Temple Mount. This is the Biden administration is currently exerting enormous pressure on Israel to halt its military operation in Gaza. You remember this young lady, Danny Seaman, who I interviewed on Monday. He really broke down this. She came up. She's one of his daughter's best friends. She's still hostage in Iran. You might remember this. This was the report on October 8th by Christiane Amanpour at CNN. Here's what she said about what happened to her.
We're now getting new video that shows Hamas appearing to take Israelis captive. This video has been geolocated by CNN, but we want to warn you that it is disturbing. It's war. This is in Gaza. You can see a barefoot woman pulled from the trunk of a Jeep by a gunman and then forced into the back seat of a car. Her face is bleeding and her wrists appear to be cable-tied behind her back. The Jeep is also appearing to have an Israeli Defense Force license plate, suggesting that it might have been stolen and brought into Gaza.
And her pants were bloody. So here's one of the UN chiefs with regard to the Palestinian Gaza thing. Listen to what he says in this interview on Sky News. This is about 2 minutes long.
You've talked about being a mediator, and you've mediated with so many different factions and groups, terrorist organizations over the years that have come to the negotiating table. In terms of Israel's plan to eliminate Hamas and have them never be part of any future negotiation when it comes to Gaza, do you think that's realistic?
I think it's very difficult. And as you say, I've worked with many different terrorist and insurgent groups. Hamas is not a terrorist group for us, of course, as you know. It's a political movement. But I think it's very difficult to dislodge these groups without a negotiated solution, which includes their aspirations. I cannot think of an example offhand of a place where a victory through warfare has succeeded against a well-entrenched group, terrorist or otherwise.
But given the track that Israel is going, the path that Israel is going down, and it has said that without total victory, without the elimination of Hamas, there is no moving forward, there is no day after. How do you think they would stomach something like that?
I think it's very difficult. I have seen the compilation videos of what happened on that awful day of October 7th. I've seen the horrors of what happened to Israelis on that day. I have met hostage families. I have total understanding, I believe, of the trauma that's caused Israel, and it's widespread in Israel, and I'm not surprised. It's a shocker. But I would add that if you want to have safety and security with people who are going to inevitably continue to be your neighbor in some form or another, you're going to have to create a relationship based on some shared values.
And Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Here's President Herzog of Israel speaking at the Munich Security Conference. He holds up a book that was found in Gaza by the IDF.
This book was written by Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar. Dr. Mahmoud al-Zahar is one of the founders of Hamas. He's a well-known Hamas leader and a political figure of Hamas. And the book mainly hails the fact that, first of all, we should not recognize the fact that there are Jews and Jewish people, but most predominantly it hails the Holocaust. It hails what the Nazis have done and calls for a nation to follow what the Nazis have done. Now we're in Munich. In the outskirts of Munich, there's the Dachau concentration camp. Tens of thousands of our nation, of Jews, were slaughtered in Dachau. And that's the problem, meaning we have to have a coalition of all of the moderate forces in the world fighting this ideology. And the moderate forces in the world include many Sunni countries too, because they will be attacked by the same jihadists as well.
So this is the front page of Israel Hayom this morning, which says that this is what they're reporting. I don't think this is correct, but the plan for the breakthrough against Saudi Arabia, Prime Minister Netanyahu is considering actually coming to terms with the American recognition of a Palestinian state in exchange for historic relations with Riyadh. I don't know that that's true. This was released. There's a cabinet meeting in Israel this morning, and they just flat out rejected recognition of a Palestinian state. We're not going to make peace with them at this time. So this is this great relief map that kind of shows you Israel. You see Gaza here at the bottom, and Egypt, the Syria and Lebanon in the north. The tall peak there is Mount Hermon. Now this is just Israeli land. You see a little bit of Jordan there on the other side of the Dead Sea. And so this is the problem is there's this coastal plain, and this coastal plain at some points is only 14 kilometers wide. So 8 miles wide. I mean, somebody could come from the heights there in Judea and Samaria. I'm sorry, I had Judea in the wrong place. Samaria and Judea, just come down from the heights, and they could get across 8 miles in an afternoon with the right kind of force and equipment. So this is a problem that is going to be. This is a Washington Post graphic on the split in the settlements, the dark blue areas in the West Bank. Here's a little bit bigger graphic, and you can see that it's very, very complicated. If you've ever been there and you've driven around, when we were up on Mount Gerizim, well, in Nablus, you can see this huge home up on the other side of Mount Gerizim. I mean, it rivals anything you've ever seen in Beverly Hills. And my question to Joel Kramer was, what does the guy do that has that much money to build that house? I said, what's he do? Sell security fencing in Israel? And Joel said, well, that's a good observation. So it's a problem. There was they're trying to end the war. This was a video that was released from a tunnel in Gaza, put in the headline of Ynet. And you see here the people walking through the tunnel. They've got the video, and that guy right there, that's Sinwar. So they're getting close to him. He's ready to go. He says in the article on the Times of London this morning, I will never give up. Somebody that knows him, I saw it in his eyes. And then Hania, who he's the multi-billionaire political leader of Hamas. Sinwar is the military leader. Sinwar is saying, here's what he says. He blames Israel for lack of progress in the negotiations. We will not accept anything except a full ceasefire and the withdrawal of the IDF from Gaza. And when I see him, I got to be honest with you, my question is, does he make these statements before or after he makes his daily trip to the barber? You can't maintain that without professional help. I'm sorry. So, and they're looking, oh, by the way, that gal you saw in the back of the truck, the Jeep with the bloody pants. She was forced to make a video that the people that were taken hostage with her are dead. So that's okay. So what's this? Okay, last thing. Big article about Israel or Egypt is building a walled enclosure on the border with Hamas. So you see this. There's this fortified camp that has suddenly appeared, but it's actually on the Egyptian side of the border. So, and it's about 8 square miles. And then when you go over to the Rafah crossing, that's that red line is the Egyptian Gaza border. By the way, that's where all the stuff came through. They have tunnels there, probably corruption in the Egyptian military. And by the way, this thing on the right, that's not the Israeli fence. That's the Egyptian fence. And they're constructing an even bigger, taller one. I thought that they're pro-Palestinian, right? But they don't seem to want them. But now they've cleared off this land here in the square or rectangle. And there's some thought that they may be making a refugee camp. Well, they don't want to put them in a refugee camp. They've been in refugee camps in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan for over 75 years. They don't have any compunction about doing that. They're political pawns, and it's time the world realizes it. This is a before and after shot of that area where that, you can see how they cleared off the land there. And I think it's about 8 square miles. So, okay, I'll save the rest for otherwise. A lot of stuff happening. I did talk about this He Gets Us ads in my sermon that I did first hour. You can find that on our YouTube channel. And a lot of stuff going on. So if you're around Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern with Tom Hughes, and then 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific with Tom Hughes, Britt Gillette, and Scott Townsend talking about AI and technology issues related to Bible prophecy. So if you can watch, or you can catch them later if you can't watch live. So let's pray. Lord, thanks so much for your word. Thanks for giving us some ideas, things to look for, and as we get closer to your return. We pray that you'll help us to stand strong in the faith, share the gospel with others, and not be dismayed by what we see happening, but be encouraged that you have blessed us by allowing us to live at one of the most incredible times in history. Bless us this week. In Jesus' name, amen.